a suburb, if you're familiar with Naperville or right next to Naperville. A lot of people don't realize Aurora is actually the second largest city in the state, before Springfield, just after Chicago. So we've had a lot of rain here in the Midwest, as you have heard, with the challenges that Michigan is having. And so there's no rain in the forecast today. It's not completely a sunny day, but it's warm enough to come outside and say hello.
Nice.
Well, I used to live in more northern climates, and I know sometimes you need that vitamin D.
well, there's not. I'm squeaking out whatever little bit I can. How's that?
Here you go. Well, thanks and welcome.
And I do have a hard stop at 1, just FYI.
Okay.
Excellent.
So if I have to leave you early, I will. But you guys have been great, and I'm a Pragmatic alumni, and what you guys are doing on your office hours is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you're getting some value out of it. It's good to be here, especially, and I appreciate you being here on your Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, well, it doesn't feel, with everything going on, it doesn't feel like Memorial Day weekend, right?
Yep.
So,
in fact, I argued with my wife this morning whether it was Memorial Day weekend. Yeah. What day of the week is it? But,
right.
Well, welcome regardless. And, this is my first AMA. And
okay.
Sounds like you've attended some of the others, but
all of the sessions are great. All the sessions. Do you have any
questions or anything you want to discuss?
No, I typically just listen in and follow along, and just consider me cheering on the sidelines.
Okay.
Great. All right. Well, welcome everybody. And the gentleman you just heard too is Todd Middlebrook. He is our instructor online today. He's a great instructor. He's out of Austin, Texas. He's got tons of experience, Microsoft, I think IBM as well, product management, product marketing. He's our guy, and he's going to answer all your questions. So feel free to raise your hand and you can answer verbally. Feel free to drop some in the chat box. We can do it that way. And we also have some that we got sent and emailed earlier, so we can start with some of those. But we're just glad you're all here joining us on this Friday before Memorial Day.
Absolutely.
All right. Welcome, Todd.
Well, good to be here.
All right, Todd, I'm going to start with an emailed question.
Okay.
It says, I'm in charge of laying out a framework for our upcoming product evaluation and go-to-market planning activities. It's the first time and like some advice on how best to approach it.
Ooh, product evaluation and go-to-market planning. That's actually a big subject. I'm going to kind of do the cheat and kind of divide it in half there. The go-to-market planning, what are all the things that you need to do to successfully take your product to market? We'll talk about that. Of course, that product evaluation, my assumption, if that individual is not on the call, my assumption is that you've got a new product and you're trying to get it out there, evaluated by either early customers, prospective customers, or perhaps evaluation by some thought leader like an industry analyst. But obviously the approach needs to be a little bit different depending on the target audience for the evaluation. But it's different ways of doing evaluations. One of the ones that worked most effectively for me way back in my IBM days was a pilot program, or as we described it, as a lighthouse program. It was an enterprise product. It was very important for us to have some customers that had good experiences with the product so that we could leverage that for our press release, customer case studies, as well as references. So being such a big, complicated product, that required us to really start the planning a year out, and then really get that lighthouse program kicked off about 6 months out. And we had to be very selective about the customers that we chose, because we were going to have to help them implement the product. And then, of course, we had evaluation guidelines that we wanted to make sure that they truly kicked the tires. Something that I've experienced, not just at IBM, but multiple times, is everyone loves to have the idea of getting onto like a beta program or be one of those select evaluators, and they all promise to give you feedback. And I find it's often a struggle to actually get that feedback once they get into the program. And so it's very important to have some type of agreement with them of what their minimal participation will be, so that you can glean the value out of it and truly to understand, did they appreciate the product? Did they see it in its full glory? And will they, as a result of those good experiences, be willing to participate in a case study or as a reference in the future? So different ways of handling those, but the overall go-to-market strategy, how do you figure out what you need to do to successfully launch your product and take it to market in general? It's hard to generalize on that one because the answer is really, it depends. The right way to do it, what are the right activities, the right assets you need to create, the right channels of communication? Do you need to do a big launch, a little launch? It depends on a lot of different variables. But some of the important variables is you've got to be very, very specific of who you're targeting, your go-to-market strategy, the launch or whatever program or campaign for that product. We're not launching a product or a campaign at planet Earth. That's not the size of our market. We need to be very targeted of all the different market segments that we could target, which are the ones that would help us achieve our goals most easily. You really should evaluate your target audiences and figure out which ones are the best ones to help you achieve the goals that you set out. And then you really have to distill down for those target markets that you pick. What do you know about the buyers? The buyers that you're targeting with that campaign or that product launch, who are they? They are really, we need to personify who those buyers are in the audiences in those target market segments. And what I mean by audiences, are you targeting like existing customers with this campaign or with this launch? Or are you targeting competitor customers? Are you going after those people that are shopping? Or are you trying to go after those untapped potentials in a market segment? You got to know who those buyers are, in which audience, and then you've got to have a deep understanding of what is it that they need to know about your product that will convince them to buy. And this really gets distilled down to who are your buyers and what is the buyer experience, or some people call it the buyer journey. What are those steps or stages that they go through? What are the questions they have? How do they know that they've even need to be looking for a solution like ours? And even if they know that, do they know that we are one of the solutions that they should evaluate? And then how do we provide, qualified leads to our sales channel or get them into our electronic sales mechanism? So it really does come down to, and if you're a Pragmatic alum, this will sound like a bit of a broken record, it comes down to your market knowledge. What you know about your target market really helps you figure out what are the right things to do. What are the right questions to answer? And that really corresponds to what are the right marketing assets, the right marketing programs or campaigns in order to guide them through their buying process and ultimately decide to be a buyer of our product. Lots of great information on the Pragmatic website about buyer personas and buyer experience, especially for those of you that are alumni. Make sure that you look on the Alumni Resource Center and look at the information there. So that's my answer to that. Go back to your knowledge about your buyers.
Awesome. All right. So we have a question from Debbie, who is on the phone. It is about her starting a competitive intelligence effort in her company, which I'm a huge fan of. And she's curious if you have any opinion about a preferred competitive intelligence app to use and any advice about what metrics to look for. Debbie, feel free to unmute and chime in if you've got additional context there, but great question, great effort on competitive intelligence.
So
Hey,
Debbie,
everyone. I'll just, thanks, Rebecca.
Sure.
And I'll just add that I've already looked at 4 applications, and I know I don't want you to feel pressured to prefer one vendor over another, but I'm just curious if anyone's had a success with a particular application and what metrics how I should be evaluating those tools. And then outside of the application, any advice about the first steps that I'm taking, because we've had no competitive intelligence at my company. So this is a really big effort. Thanks.
So Debbie, I do not have any experience with some of the more recent evaluation products. But if you go look at my my bio, I've been focused on competitive strategy for a large part of my career. And so I'm going to maybe be a little controversial here and perhaps suggest before you start thinking about technology to help you evaluate products, I would maybe ask you, do you have competitive products that you feel are superior or inferior to your products? Is there some perception within your organization about your product, or are you getting feedback from customers or recent sales engagements? What's making you go down this road is my real question.
Oh yeah, those are great questions. We're in a very niche software industry, and we are one of 4 big players in it. We're also the tiniest company in that space. So we're up against 3 other big vendors who have a lot more dollars. And we know intuitively what our strengths and weaknesses are, but we need to figure out how to actually put some facts behind that. And more than that, we need to be able to put it in one location and gather tribal knowledge and knowledge that people bring back from out in the field, which is probably at least 50% of the information we're going to get. So I think the repository is really important, which is why I was leaning on asking about the actual applications to use. But I'm certainly interested in hearing anything you have to say outside of that.
So let me tell you what was behind that question is what I have found is often there can be technical differences. And sometimes those differences go in our favor. Sometimes they go in the competitor's favor. But we get particularly excited when we find out, we've got 218 features and they've only got 119. And, we often end up teaching our sales team, make sure you go talk about this delta, talk about these differences. But what I've found over the years is those differences may not matter. It's really not what the technical differences are in the product, but what are the differences in the products that your market cares about? What really makes them value your product more or less than theirs? It's trying to distinguish of the differences, which differences actually matter, which ones are meaningful, or which differences are valuable, pro or con for us. And do you do a win-loss analysis today?
Pardon me?
You do win-loss analysis today?
We do, yeah. And actually, I will say that I'm not really looking for a feature-to-feature comparison. And I did learn to not do that through some of the Pragmatic courses. Okay. So that was great information. It's really like we know what our value-based points are. There's technical information that we need to back that up. But
okay.
Again, it's, so I'm interested in hearing, I suppose, if you have any ideas about where to do that intel. But yeah, also, I'm also at the stage of, whoops, that was a loud notification. I'm at the stage of trying to figure out, what the repository would be. We've done the poor man's version. That doesn't.
I was going to ask, what do you use to store and share your win-loss information?
Word documents.
Yep.
We don't even have a good repository for that. Yeah. Why is there a leading? Is there a good suggestion for storing them in a different way?
I was also burning with curiosity because I always think that's a problem. And we've done Teams, which Clifton mentioned as well, just sort of a Teams or a SharePoint environment where you can share information. And then I've seen a couple different win-loss vendors who have sort of their own repository. And because win-loss often brings you a lot of competitive information, I was thinking if you had one for one aspect, you could leverage it for both.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, there. It depends on which technologies people have standardized on. If they're a Google shop using, Google Sites, but Microsoft shops, things like SharePoint, Microsoft Teams. At Microsoft, we used OneNote. Nice about OneNote is you can drop all sorts of different type of media, from URLs to video to obviously documents, and they're cloud enabled. So if you're using OneDrive as a back end, if you make a change to the document, it will cascade out to anybody who's subscribed to that OneNote notebook. But yeah, there is no silver bullet. If you're a Slack shop, maybe that's the tool that you want to use. One of the things that's great about, like, do you guys use Teams or Slack?
We use Teams company-wide as of recently, and we've tried to use Confluence in kind of a similar way, but it just feels very unwieldy. It doesn't have any automatic features like the kind I'm hearing you talk about in Teams. So I could definitely, at least as an interim solution, look at that, because that is company-wide. We use Slack on the side, so not all the teams have that.
Yeah. If the field is on Slack, or if your field is on Teams, I would kind of look at the tools that they use, where they're dropping their documents and what they're using to chat. And then you can tap into that, especially to get that organic field experience where you can throw out a question in chat, or, ask them, to get access to do your own win-loss analysis, or, hey, did you guys see this? Has this come up? You just have that ability to ping the field, and it all gets captured. You don't lose that information. God, I was just thinking as I was talking, I remember going down the wiki. I remember doing the SharePoint. It's just like whatever new technology, but regardless, pick one and that you can point everybody to.
And if it's something they're already using and not a different place to go, that's always great. And little known fact about Todd, he is an expert on how to use all things Microsoft. And so when I'm like, does it do this? He always knows.
Yeah, I'm starting to lose some of that knowledge, but I appreciate it nonetheless. 7 years. But every time they created a new Microsoft product, that was the new de facto standards. Like, it was OneNote, then it became Live Meeting, then it became Skype. Yeah. So pick whatever your field's using. So that's where they go to get information, where they go to communicate.
Yeah, it seems like the most frictionless way possible for sales to access it is a super important aspect, right?
Because you don't have to fight the battle of trying to get them to use a new technology. It's just too much, a bridge too far, you might say.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
My pleasure.
All right. Anyone else have a question? Please raise your hand. I do have another email question for you, Todd. Something I think many of us on the phone have probably gone through, but this person, Rana, just recently her company was acquired a few weeks back, and it's her first experience in a merger. That's always a tough one. On the product marketing side, she's looking at what she can do to make sure that the merger is successful.
Well, that is always an interesting experience, isn't it? Getting acquired or assimilated, as it might be. When I worked at IBM, I worked at a small company called Tivoli Systems that was purchased by IBM. So I got to experience that personally. But as a product marketing professional, not knowing who you are, not knowing who purchased you, but often the acquiring company is acquiring you maybe to go into a new market segment that they haven't previously been in, or a product category that they have not had access to in their portfolio previously. So they often don't know what they don't know. And they, when you get assimilated, they often bring their knowledge about their market, their knowledge about their products, and try to enforce that as the parent company. And what I would suggest would be important as a product marketing professional is to educate your new parent company in your market and to educate them in your product through your market's eyes. So how is your market different than the market that they've traditionally gone after? And a great vehicle to tell this story is being able to distill out who are the buyer personas that your products have traditionally gone after. What markets are, what do they look like? What industry are they in? What size organization? What kind of buyers exist? Are they primarily economic buyers? Are they technical buyers? And then ultimately, what is our product to them? What problems do we solve for those buyers? And what ultimate value do we provide to those buyers? So I would educate them into your target market. And if you have not already documented this, you can do this rather quickly. You can, as we were just saying from the competitive perspective, if you have not personified your buyers, you can go talk to your sales channel and have them tell you about who they've been selling to and which cast of characters they consistently are selling to, and whether it's CIOs, CTOs, what's that group look like, and start to construct your buyer personas. And then the second artifact that I would suggest is what we call a positioning document. A positioning document describes your product, but not in what features and functions. It's got a back-end database, mobile app front end, but instead it describes your product through the market's eyes of what is their big problem, what are the challenges that they have and why are those challenges bad for them? And then the positioning statement of, okay, and what of their problems do we solve? And by solving those problems for them, what is that value we create? What is that differentiated value? How do we make their business, or if we're going after consumers, how do we make their lives better? So you can use these artifacts as a way to tell the story of who you've traditionally gone after. And really it tells the story also of how they may be different than the buyers that your parent company has traditionally gone after. And how you may solve problems for this market that your parent company hasn't traditionally solved. I think that is the best baton that you could really pass to your new parent company to help them explain your product and your market.
And I think what's also great about that, Todd, is that you really demonstrate the difference that product marketing can bring, because there's also a chance that the acquiring company either doesn't have product marketing or they don't have it in the same way. And showing that buyer expertise, I think, is an excellent way to show your value early by also providing things that were going to be successful. So,
yep. Your market expertise is the value that you're going to provide back to that organization.
Absolutely. Okay. Don't be shy, guys. If you've got a question, pop in the chat so we don't run out of time before your question comes in. But I do have another email question. And this is one that I know we've discussed before. But product teams, let's see. It was a big discussion in the product group as a company overall on the difference and the priority of quantitative data over qualitative data, and how those two should be looked at, right? This is like a great discussion of fight of all times, but I would love your thoughts on quantitative, qualitative, and how to get the best out of both in your discussions in an organization.
I get this a lot. Which one's better, right? Quantitative or qualitative? And my answer is I love them both equally, just like my children. But it's true, one day I like one child better than the other. Well, it's the same as true. Quantitative or qualitative data are good for the purposes, and I need different things depending on what I'm trying to do. And qualitative data, what we loosely call discovery research, that's where you learn stuff. That's where the meat is. That's where you find things that you didn't know, understand things. This could be finding problems that you don't know about previously, or understanding your users or your buyers better than you did before. That's all qualitative and being able to describe what it is you've learned. Quantitative data is not very good at discovery. It's not very good at answering questions that you haven't already envisioned. But quantitative data is good at proving what you think you know, and or disproving, as the case may be. And obviously quantifying and understanding, the numbers. I like to think of the combination of the two as kind of like the scientific method. You go out and you learn things, you establish hypotheses, and eventually you go test those hypotheses to prove or disprove them. And then, of course, not only can you prove that things are right, but you can prove that they're large enough for you to care about them or pervasive enough for you to care about them. And then, of course, the quantitative data also can give you the KPIs that you can measure on an ongoing basis. So I would say they are the yin and yang of a market expert, having both qualitative and quantitative data available to you. But they're both good for their purposes. Where I think we get in trouble is when we try to mix and match them. And look, most of the companies that I teach, we love the quantitative because there's numbers and we can go talk to people and show them and justify, and they definitely have that benefit. But if we only use the quantitative mechanisms, we miss out on the discovery and learning new things and understanding our market better than we do today.
Great. All right. And then we have a great question that came in from Minesh. And Minesh was really talking about organizational alignment and how to get sales and operations who may not be familiar with product and development cycles and processes, how to communicate well with them what's coming and what matters to them and kind of bring them on board.
So
And Minesh, good things to add to that, please. Please pop in if I didn't summarize it well.
So I haven't had a chance. So you got a paragraph there, but Minesh, if you're trying to tell your product story to whether it's operations or the field that may not understand development life cycle, usually roadmaps are the way to tell that story. Where they become kind of a crude tool is often we have a single roadmap, same one we use to to talk to the development team about what we're doing now and what we're going to do next. We then try to take that same roadmap and tell finance what we're doing and what we're doing next, and we use that same roadmap maybe even to talk to our sales channel or our customers. I want you to think more broadly of roadmaps. I want you to think about your stakeholders and what are the questions that they have? What do they need to know? What decisions are they trying to make? And then customize a roadmap that tells the story and answers the questions that they need. So, for example, of a roadmap for educating your sales team, I would still call that an internal roadmap. They need to know what they're selling today. They need to know what they are going to be asked to sell in the foreseeable future. They need to know things like what campaigns are we putting in place in preparation for maybe a near-term product launch. Let's customize a roadmap that tells that story. And again, I'm not sure what your operations team, whether you mean like your IT operations, if they're going to be expected to deploy infrastructure, host a SaaS service, it's really going back to think of them like markets. What questions are they trying to answer? What are they trying to solve for themselves? And then construct a roadmap that helps answer those questions and helps them make the decisions that they need to make. But it's the same long-term vision, describing the same products, but answering different questions in those artifacts.
Thank you.
That helpful, Manish?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
And I do think, to your point, Todd, to making sure that we're presenting information, sort of the what's in it for them. We often are so excited as product people about the technical aspects of it and how it's done and created, that really remembering to present it as if they were a persona that you needed to get kind of bought into what to do is a great way also to
Yeah, I think Rebecca, you mentioned something that I'm getting myself caught into all the time, which is the little bit more technical kind of side of things, and just realign and basically put ourselves in their feet and then recommunicate that, I think, is what you're trying to say there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're not alone with that problem. So
no. And those technical details may not answer their questions.
Yes.
Got it.
Good questions. All right. Anyone else have a question they want to pop in before I go back to our email list?
I do want to wave. I see a familiar face, Monique. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Yeah. Welcome back. Hope you're doing healthy and well.
Yes, trying, it's getting a little, walls are closing in just a little bit.
We're all there.
Todd and I were talking about that before the call started. So yes.
Get me out of here.
All right, Todd, I know as an instructor for Build, this is a question you know and love. Best way to prioritize a list of product features?
Easy. High, medium, low. Okay, next question.
And you're done.
That was not my real answer. You want to keep listening. How to prioritize features to help you plan a release. Yeah, I make the joke about high, medium, low because we all end up coming up with some version of that. The must-haves to the nice-to-haves. A personal favorite was the P1s, the P2s, and the P3s, the P0s. The problem with those is you ultimately end up having to defend the list, right? Whether you're defending the list with your dev team, here are the most important things for the next release. It could be your dev team, could be your executives, could be your sales team, could be a combination of them, but you put that list up and you go, here's what I think are the most important things for the next release. And then you might as well hear the because somebody's going to disagree with you. That thing you said's a high, I think's a low. Okay, let's argue about it. Or the thing that you said's a must-have, I think's a nice-to-have. And what often happens is whoever's the most politically powerful in the room wins. So if your boss disagrees, then she gets her favorite thing as a high and your favorite thing went to a low. There's this subjective nature to some of the most common mechanisms. Broken record here, you need an approach that doesn't rely on your opinions, that brings data in and is more factual, doesn't require defense of your opinion. You guys remember the most popular rule from Pragmatic on the back of your frameworks, if you got one, your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. So what you want to do is come up with a way that pulls in market facts and then allows you to quantify with market facts why one idea might be more or less important than another. And we simply say that the best way to do this at the most simplistic level is to track evidence. How much evidence do you have that you might think of this as the pervasiveness of this requirement. Yeah, that is, how pervasive is this problem that it solves? Is one feature more applicable to a broader portion of your target market, whereas maybe another feature, is it one customer asking for it versus a large number of potential customers? There's having some way an evidence score, and then coming up with an impact scale. I think most of you probably have an impact scale today that you use with like bugs. We end up having things like this is a SEV1 bug, this is a SEV2 bug, and you define the difference. You know, oh, a SEV1 bug would crash the entire system and would take the customer down. Versus a SEV2, we define it as might cause bad performance issues for the customer. But we define what is a SEV1 versus a SEV2. And we also often do something very similar for customer support issues. Like, well, again, maybe even use the same language. SEV1, customer support issue, customer down, hair's on fire. Versus a SEV2, maybe that's causing customer satisfaction issues. But we've defined some impact scale to describe the differences between them. And you can do something similar for the requirements that you have. An impact scale that describes what is the impact of this on your market, how much, how bad is the problem, or you could define it as what is the impact scale to you, the vendor. What's the negative impact if we don't solve this, add this new feature to the product? Would it, impact our ability to sell? Would it make us lose deals that are currently in the pipeline? Define some type of impact scale, and you can end up combining the facts that you have about the pervasiveness of the problem and the impact scale to start creating a stack rank, in essence, of your features. And with that market data to back it up, you're going to have to defend any list you put in front of a group, especially a development. But if you're using this and they see something's at the top line, Todd, why is that important? This problem is a pervasive problem in the marketplace, and it's a level 1, which means it's a very bad problem for the market. That's why that one's at the top of the list. Makes it a much more objective conversation. That's kind of like the most simplistic version of it, but starting there, you can start bringing in additional facts, different weightings, but the real secret sauce is coming up with a fact-based and objective way of differentiating and prioritizing these, that the facts do the speaking for you and don't require your opinion. So again, there's quite a few good articles on the alumni site on this topic, as well as we cover this quite deeply in the build class. If you have not looked into that one, we spend probably almost the entire half of the day developing a prioritization mechanism and then using it to help plan future releases. Hope that helped.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question here. And again, guys, if you got a question, please feel free to pop it in. But here's a very good question. How can you test the demand for a new product or an updated version without spending a ton of time and money? What's a good way of getting sort of an acid test on the interest levels?
Yeah, and this one's going to depend a bit on the complexity of the product. And also whether it is a brand new innovative product, or is it just your first version of this product, but it's a pre-existing product category. There's already competitors out there. I am definitely in the school of test early, test often, especially in the ideation stage. So if you're trying to figure out, should we build one of these? You can go out and I love the terminology Rebecca just used, acid test that idea. Who do you think would buy one of these? Who do you think you would target and build that product for? Without spending a lot of money, you can go out and, if you want, you could build a prototype. And my advice is, don't spend a lot of money building a prototype. If you're trying to ask yourself, should we build this in the first place? You can use, if it's software, you could use things like prototype tools like Balsamic to describe the product. Or maybe you can just create a PowerPoint deck that would describe what the product would do. Go present that prototype. If it's hardware, you could do the same thing. Mock it up in some way, or do a PowerPoint deck. Go talk to who you think would be interested and describe the product to them and say, in essence, if we were to build an X, if it did Y and it did Z, would this be something that you're interested in? And a lot of people think, oh, well, Todd, this product, it's so innovative. There's no way my market would have ever conceived of it. Doesn't matter if they're not as technical as you are. If you present a product to somebody, I mean, don't we all do this as consumers? If you hear about a product, read about a product, in the back of your head, you're listening to what you are being told about it or what you've learned about it. And in the back of your head, you're saying, could I use one of those? Would that help me? Does that solve a problem that I have? Or is that better than the way I solve that today? That's what we're trying to tap into. And, a handful of interviews can validate or acid test whether you should. And then, as I said, I'm all for, once you've started to build something, try to solicit feedback about what you're building and ensure that what you've designed is correct, that it's functional, that it's meeting their needs, or that you haven't gone off course. And if you are a software development organization and they're practicing one of the iterative development approaches, kind of the school of Agile and Scrum and others, what's great about those development methodologies is they bake into the fact that they've got completed code that you could go out and test as they're building. Compare that to the old days, under waterfall, where you had to build a product and wait until it was done and maybe put it in a beta program, or wait until you launch the product widely to the market, only then to find out whether you got it right or not. So from the ideation stage to the designing and building phase, you can, acid test and then test throughout the build process.
Awesome. Todd, this was delightful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Awesome. All right. And thank all of you for coming. Remember, try that again. Don't forget, we will be here every Friday, same time, same bat channel. Always happy to answer any and all questions. I hope everybody has a fantastic Memorial Day. And if you've served in the service, thank you very much. And if not, that's okay too. Just enjoy a little time off. I think we can all use it, even if we can't go anywhere. Also, just let everyone know that there is the alumni community is now open. And if you haven't seen it and checked it out, I absolutely recommend you watch it. We've got some open house videos. The environment back there's about 200 product managers, the discussions, sort of the Todd and his team of instructors have some extra content back there. It's a really neat. And we also have a little kind of secret code going around, alumni 225, which gives your first year subscription for 225. But I do encourage you to check it out. The discussions back there, the sort of community developing is really something quite special. And then Norman just reminded me that next Tuesday we've got a product chat webinar that we also invite you guys to, because we like doing it. It's about constant communication in a rapidly changing market. All right, that does it for me. Anything you want to add, Todd?
Nope. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day. I hope you stay in touch with us and look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.